Hey, it's Yay for Yarn, and today I'm going to show you how to crochet the herringbone scarf. So this is a very simple striped scarf, but we're going to add a little bit of texture to it by using the herringbone half double crochet, which is just a simple variation on the regular half double crochet stitch. And this stitch makes a really nice, simple, but interesting texture to the crocheted fabric. So the first thing you'll need for this project is the written pattern. You can view the free version of the written pattern by visiting the first link in the description box down below, or you can grab the ad-free PDF version of this pattern by visiting the second link in the description box down below. So once you have the pattern, then of course you'll need to choose some yarn. Now I am using this brand new line of yarn from Furls Crochet, and it is called Wander. This is a very basic worsted weight acrylic. It's nice and smooth and soft, not scratchy at all, and it has a little bit of a satiny texture to it, but you can use any number 4 worsted weight yarn that you like. You can see there's the number 4 medium category symbol right there. So I have 5 skeins of this yarn. I have 2 skeins of snow, 2 skeins of mist, and 1 skein of cobblestone. And of course this is kind of a creamy, like a yellowish creamy off-white as far as the snow color. This one is kind of a silver yarn, and the cobblestone here is kind of a dark, slightly purplish toned brown. And I think all of these colors work really nicely together. So once you have your yarn picked out, then you'll also need a crochet hook. This is the Furls Streamline hook, and this is a size J 6mm hook. Now of course you'll want to choose the hook that will get you the correct gauge for the pattern to make sure that your scarf comes out the correct size, and make sure that you don't end up having a scarf that's too large and causing you to run out of yarn, and etc. So you'll need a crochet hook of whatever size that you need to obtain the correct gauge, but I'm using this size J Furls Crochet wooden streamline hook, very nice and smooth. So you'll also need a ruler or a measuring tape and a pair of scissors. And for this project, you'll definitely want to make sure you're using a good pair of scissors that can cut through several strands of yarn at once, because we are going to be using these to help us make our fringe. Alright, so now that we have our supplies, we can get started with the crochet. Alright, so the best thing about this pattern, in my opinion, is the fact that we are not going to be weaving in any yarn tails at all. So every time we change colors, start with a new yarn, we're going to leave a tail at least 6 inches long and leave it loose, because we're going to incorporate all those yarn tails as part of our fringe so that we don't have to weave in any yarn tails. So yay for that. That's pretty cool. So I've got my hook here, and we're going to start by making a row of foundation single crochet. Now, if you're not familiar with foundation single crochet, it's a way of working the equivalent of a foundation chain and the first row of single crochet at the same time. And of course, the pattern includes instructions for a regular foundation chain and a regular row of single crochet if you prefer, but I really recommend the foundation single crochet because I much prefer the feel of it. It is a lot more stretchy and pliable. So if you'd like to learn more about the foundation single crochet and see a more in-depth demonstration, I have a video on the foundation stitches, and you can watch that by visiting the link down below. But I'm going to go ahead and start by chaining 2. And what we're going to do is we're going to be working 1 extra step into our single crochet to add the chain to the base of it. So I'm going to skip the first chain on my hook, insert my hook into the second chain, then I'm going to yarn over, pull up a loop. Now I have 2 loops on my hook. Now I'm going to yarn over, pull through 1 loop, which makes the chain part, and yarn over, pull through 2 loops, which makes the single crochet. So for all the following stitches, we're going to be working into the base of the previous stitch. So if you turn, here's the top of the stitch, if you turn it over to see the bottom, you'll see that there are 2 strands across the base of the previous stitch. A front strand and a back strand. Looks a lot like the top of a regular stitch. We're going to insert our hook into both of those. Yarn over, pull up a loop. Yarn over, pull through 1 loop. And then yarn over, pull through 2 loops. So again, I'm going to come to the base of the previous stitch and insert my hook into both strands. Yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through one loop, yarn over, pull through two loops. So I'm going to continue working my row of foundation single crochet until I have the total number of stitches required, and we are going for a total of 200 stitches. So after that very first foundation single crochet that we worked into the chain, we're going to work 199 more foundation single crochet to make our scarf long enough, because this scarf is worked sideways so that the rows that we're crocheting are actually going the long side of the scarf. So instead of making a piece about that wide and then working short rows back and forth across to give our scarf length, we're making the long edge of the scarf with our foundation edge, and then we're going to be working long rows back and forth to add the width of our scarf. So I'm going to continue working foundation single crochet stitches until I have a total of 200 stitches, not including the chain stitches at the beginning. Alright, so I have finished working my row of foundation single crochet, and this is the actual length that your scarf will be. So if you want to adjust the length, then you can do that by adding stitches or taking away stitches in your row of foundation single crochet. However, make sure that if you do any adjustments, you make sure you have extra yarn if you're making it longer, so that you won't run out of yarn. Alright, so now we're ready to move on to the herringbone row. And this is the row that we're going to be repeating and using with different colors to make our stripes. So first we're going to chain 2 and turn the work. And then we're going to start working herringbone half double crochet stitches all the way across. So in this very first stitch here where my chain is coming from, I'm going to yarn over, insert my hook into that stitch, yarn over, pull up a loop. And at this point it looks just like a regular half double crochet. But we're going to add one more step into this stitch to make it have that herringbone texture. So I'm going to take the first loop, I'm not going to yarn over, I'm going to take the first loop on my hook and pull it through the second one. So I now only have 2 loops left. Now I can yarn over and pull through those 2 loops, and that creates a herringbone half double crochet. So I'm going to herringbone half double crochet in every stitch across my row. So again, I'm going to yarn over, insert my hook into the next stitch, yarn over, pull up a loop. Then I'm going to take that first loop, pull it through the second one, yarn over, pull through the remaining 2 loops. Again, I'm going to yarn over, insert my hook into the next stitch, yarn over, pull up a loop, pull that first loop through the second one, and then yarn over, pull through 2 loops. And you can kind of see how that it makes this little horizontal bump on the front of each stitch, and it also slants the stitch just a little bit. So by the time we continue working this row again and again, then we have a slightly slanted zigzag texture with those little horizontal bumps. So one more time with the herringbone half double crochet, I'm going to yarn over, insert my hook into the next stitch, yarn over, pull up a loop, pull that first loop through the second one, and then yarn over, pull through 2 loops. So I'm going to continue working a herringbone half double crochet in every stitch across my row until I get to the end of this row. Alright, so I have finished working that row, and I have cut the yarn, left my yarn tail, and tied off. And now we're going to move on to our stripes. So there's a whole sequence of stripes in the pattern, and what you'll want to do is follow that series of stripes. So for example, next I'm going to switch to color C, which is my brown, and work one row, then I'm going to come back to color A and work another row, then I'm going to go back to color C and work 2 rows. So we're going to be repeating this herringbone row, and each time we're going to be joining new yarn, leaving a tail of both the old yarn and the new yarn so that we can incorporate those tails into our fringe later, and we don't have to worry about weaving in any yarn tails at all. So I'm going to go ahead and start working through the stripe pattern, basically repeating the row that we just did with those herringbone half double crochet stitches, and just switching colors each time the pattern says to, always making sure to leave a tail of both yarns. And I'm going to work through some of those stripes, and then I'll show you what that looks like. Alright, so I've finished working all the rows on my scarf, following the stripe pattern in the instructions. And now we can go one of two routes. We can either block our piece before we add fringe, or we can add the fringe and then block our piece. So blocking is a technique that smooths out the fabric, evens it out a little bit, helps relax the yarn and make it smooth and pliable and drape nicely. So it's definitely not a step that we want to skip, but you can either choose to block your piece now or block your piece after fringe. I'm going to choose to block it after the fringe, mainly because I like to steam fringe anyway. So since I'm going to be steam blocking this is an acrylic yarn, I'm going to go ahead and just do it all at once because I generally prefer to steam my fringe to make it lay perfectly smooth. So I will put a link down below for my blocking tutorial, and you can go check that out if you're not familiar with blocking, but I'm going to choose to block mine after fringe. So what I have here is I have my scissors, my hook, and some lengths of yarn. Now I have already cut, according to the pattern instructions, 12-inch lengths of yarn in each color. So for the color A, you're going to need 40 lengths of yarn that are 12 inches long. For color B, you're going to need 36. And for color C, you need 20. So what we're going to do is add this fringe to the ends of our scarf. So I'm going to go ahead and get the end of the scarf ready for adding fringe. And now you can see why we have not woven in the yarn tails, because we're just going to include them as part of the fringe. So what we're going to be doing is basically taking pairs of yarn strands, because we're going to be adding 2 strands of fringe to the end of each row, and then we're going to go ahead and loop them through, and we're going to just pull the yarn tails along with it into the fringe. So I'm going to go ahead and start right here with this stripe in the middle. You can start wherever you want. So I'm going to take 2 strands of my color C yarn, which is this brown color. And what we're going to do is take those 2, line up the ends fairly closely, and then I'm going to fold them in half. So I have 2 strands of yarn here. I'm going to fold them in half, and I'm going to take that halfway point and just hold it there with my finger. Then I'm going to take my crochet hook and insert it into the end of the row that matches it. So I'm going to take that halfway point of those folded strands of fringe, and I'm going to use that crochet hook to pull it through. And at this point, if you do have your yarn tails to pull into your fringe, you can just go ahead and include that. So I'm going to grab the yarn tail that matches for this row, hold it together with the rest of my fringe, and then I can grab all of those strands with my crochet hook. And it is a little much for one crochet hook of this size, but it's okay. And then just pull it through that first loop. So then when I tug on this to pull it tight, you can see we have a nice cluster of fringe here. Now I'm doing kind of a thicker fringe. If you would rather, you could do a thinner fringe without using 2 strands per row. But I'm going to go ahead and do a thicker fringe with this. So let's say I want to move this direction. So right here is a cream colored row. So I'm going to grab 2 strands of the cream colored yarn and line them up on the ends because they were measured and cut the same length. And then I'm going to fold them both in half. So here's the halfway point of my fringe. Now I can insert my hook into the end of that row, grab the halfway point with my hook, pull it just through the edge of the fabric. Then here's a yarn tail that matches that I can just go ahead and pull into the fringe right there. Then I can grab all those strands of fringe with my hook, pull them all the way through that loop. And again, once you pull this tight, it is nice and secure, and you have another neat little cluster of fringe. So I'm going to go ahead and keep doing this for every row of my project. So here is a silver row, and again I'm going to grab 2 strands of my fringe here, and then I'm going to again line them up, fold them in half, and then take that halfway point, insert my hook into the end of the row that I'm working with, pull that halfway point of the fringe through the work, and I'm going to just go ahead and include that yarn tail with it and pull it through and give it a little tug to tighten it up. So there is kind of an example of how my fringe would look once it's finished. Of course, it has not been trimmed yet, but this is the density of fringe that I'm going for. I like a reasonably thick fringe. So I'm going to go ahead and continue doing this at the end of each row. And once I've filled up the entire end of this scarf, I've put fringe in the end of every row and in the end of the other ends of the rows at the other end of the scarf. Then we'll be ready to trim and steam our fringe. And the purpose of steaming it is because a lot of times when you do your fringe, you'll be using yarn that's kind of in the end of the skein. It might be, from the middle or whatever, but it's kind of wadded up and crinkly. And steaming helps straighten it out and make it lay perfectly smooth, so that once we do trim it, we're going to be trimming a flat, smooth fringe so that it can be straight, versus if our strands of yarn were kind of all bent and crinkly. These actually aren't too bad as far as being bent and crinkly, but sometimes they are. Sometimes when you get to this point, the yarn that you have left is all bent, smushed, wadded up. So steaming helps to smooth it out very nicely. So I'm going to go ahead and add fringe to both ends of my scarf, matching the colors for each stripe. And then I'm going to go ahead and steam block the entire scarf, and I'm just going to steam the fringe as well. And as you steam your fringe, you just want to, especially if you're using an acrylic yarn, you can steam natural fibers if you want to, but this works especially well on synthetics. So as you steam your fringe, you're just going to steam over the top of it. Again, we're not letting anything touch the yarn, but you steam over the top of it. And then once you've set your iron or your steamer out of the way, and while the yarn is still warm, you can just take your hand and smooth it out, stretch those strands flat, kind of take it through your fingers like that if you want to, and just smooth it out so that when it dries and cools, then it will lay smooth and straight. So that's the technique I like to use. I'm going to go ahead and do that, fringe my scarf, steam the scarf and the fringe, and then we'll come back and we'll trim the fringe. Alright, so I have steamed my scarf and my fringe, and I've already gone ahead and trimmed the fringe on this side. So now all that's left to do to finish this up is to trim the fringe on this side. So I like to do this with a ruler. Of course, you can never get it like just perfectly straight with a perfectly clean cut all the way across, but I think a ruler helps to make that cut as smooth and clean as you can get it with scissors. So I'm going to go ahead and move this end of the scarf out of the way, and we're going to work with this end. And what I like to do is smooth everything out so that all of the strands of fringe are straight. They're not all twisted up and crossed with a lot of the strands next to it. We just kind of want them to lay smooth and relatively flat. And another thing you want to watch for is to make sure that your scarf edge is also relatively straight, because when you lay it down, it might not be laying straight until you straighten it out. So once your fringe is nice and smooth, you'll want to decide how long you want to cut it. And for me, I normally look at some of the shortest strands, because even though we measured this, when we pull this through with the hook, sometimes the center point gets off-center just a tiny bit, even if it's not by much, and that can mess with where the ends of your fringe fall. So some of the shortest ones that I have here are about 5 inches from the edge. So I'm going to go ahead and cut my fringe 5 inches from the edge here. So to do that, I'm going to go ahead, and since I've already measured that this clump of fringe right here and this clump of fringe right here are about 5 inches in from the edge, or out from the edge I should say, I'm going to lay my ruler across those two clumps of fringe to give me a reference point for how far 5 inches from the edge is. So now as I go across here with my scissors, I'm going to carefully cut close to this edge. So what I'm actually going to do is move it down just a touch, about a 1/4 inch from those 5-inch long strand ends. And then when I go to cut it, I'm going to cut about a 1/4 inch away from the ruler. Alright, so I've trimmed all the way across, and if you find any places where the scissors didn't quite grab the whole strand or it missed a couple spots, then you can go through at this point and kind of smooth those out by just trimming off any little bits that are still sticking up past the rest of the edges. Alright, so now the fringe on both ends of my scarf is finished, and it is nice and smooth and straight because we steamed it, but it's also trimmed pretty straight along the edge because we used that ruler technique. And of course, as you wear the scarf and as you kind of shift it around, of course the fringe strands are not always going to hang in a way that makes the edge look perfectly straight. But that's just what happens anytime you have fringe on something because it has a lot of movement to it. So it's going to move around a bit. And it might not always be like perfectly straightened out and not crossed over with the other pieces, but that's okay too. So now that I have all the fringe on my scarf, now the scarf is finished. So I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you liked it, please give it a thumbs up. If you make this project, let me know how it turns out for you in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe, making sure you click the little bell next to the subscribe button to be notified of new videos. Thanks for watching.